Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Patty. I go by Pattymac Makes everywhere online. And in today's video, we are going to make block number 3 that is part of the Power of 3 quilt. The Power of 3 is designed as a lap quilt, and it's also what we call a row quilt, which means each row is comprised of one specific block design. So now we're on to row 3, and that is this particular block that I have on the cutting mat for you right now. This block is probably the most challenging in the whole project, and it's kind of deceptive. You think it's going to be real easy because it's nothing but half square triangles, but then when you start putting it together, it's a bit of a challenge. So this is a really good one if you are working with your half square triangle technique. This will help you with that. The block, as I have designed it, is a 12.5 inch square. All of the blocks in the Power of 3 quilt are 12.5 inches. And this particular block is a 16 grid, which means it's 4 blocks across and 4 blocks down. And each one of these half square triangle blocks will be cut to 3.5 inches. So you can make your half square triangles however it is that you prefer. What you want is to have the block that's going to be sewn into the design measuring 3.5 inches. I'm going to give you cutting instructions to follow how I laid this one out. And what I did with this quilt design is I picked 2 main colors and a contrast color. In my case, the 2 main colors were the blue and the red, and the contrast is the gold. And then I used a white tone on tone for a background fabric. The pieces that you'll need for this particular square, now let me tell you, when I make my half square triangles, I cut the initial block, the initial square, a full inch larger. And then I make my half square triangle units 2 at a time. I sew them, I press them out, I trim them down. If you prefer to make yours going with 7/8 of an inch, then that is perfectly fine. However it is that you like to make your 3.5 inch squares or HSTs, go ahead. But I'm going to give you the cutting instructions for the way that I do them. And what that is everything is going to be cut at 4.5 inches. So you're going to wind up cutting 2 4.5 inch red blocks. You're going to cut 6 of the blue at 4.5 inches. You're going to want 2 of the yellow or the gold at 4.5 inches. And you're going to want 6 4.5 inch squares for your background. Once you have all of those squares cut, then you're going to pair the 2 reds with the white, and then you're going to pair the 2 yellows with the blue. And then everything that you have left will be the blue and white, and you'll just pair all of those. And go ahead and just make your half square triangles as you prefer. And once you've paired all of your fabrics, go ahead and make your 2 at a time HST blocks in your preferred method. Trim them to 3.5 inches, and we'll go on to the next part of the tutorial. I have a specific method that I like to use when I'm putting together these 16 patch blocks. It works for me. I wanted to share it with you today. I haven't seen anybody else talk about it quite like this, so I don't know that it's unique to my thought process, but it's how I do it. It works for me because I can have a little bit of trouble getting all of these patterns and shapes where they need to be. And so I discovered that when I work with a 16 patch block, if I divide that into quadrants, like 4 quadrants, what I'm actually doing then is constructing 4 patches. And that is a lot easier for me. So, okay, let's jump into the actual tutorial part of the video, and I'll show you what I mean. Here's my tip for putting this block together. I am using two main colors and an accent color. And for me in this overall quilt design, my main colors are the red and blue, the gold is the accent, and then the white is my background. And this particular block is all half square triangles. So the first thing we'll do is pair all of our fabrics into the half square triangles. And for this one, because the red are all paired with the white, I'm just going to put those together. And then I'll draw my sewing lines onto the back of the lighter color fabric. The sewing lines are 1/4 inch off of the point. And then what I do is fasten on both sides. And then that's ready to go to the machine. And I will go ahead and pair all of my fabrics to begin, and then chain piece all of the HST blocks at one time. All of my half square triangles are ready to be pieced. So I've sewn them to their proper contrasting fabric, and I have trimmed them down using my 3.5 inch square ruler. I have a specific method that I follow for making half square triangles, and I will link to that video and blog post for you. Just suffice it to say that the finished size you're going to want for all of your HST units or half square triangle units is going to be 3.5 inches. So we'll put that out of the way. So let's talk about this block. This is the pattern, and if you're following along in the Power of 3 Quilt Along, this is the third block in our series. Now you don't have to be in the Quilt Along or even making the quilt pattern to make this block. It's a really good skill builder block, and I'm going to tell you, it's challenging. It's challenging because you have so many points where all of your pieces need to align perfectly to get the best result. Keep in mind that you're just going to take your time with this and be really, really careful how you put every little piece together. This particular block is a classic 16 by 16 block, and what that means is you have 4 across and 4 down, and so the entire block is comprised of 16 individual units. Now there's a couple of ways to put this together. You can lay out your pieces and just go row, row, row. That is certainly a way to do it. I find that that is a little bit of a challenge because then in every single place you have got to line up those 4 or 3 major intersections all the way down. And to me, that's just a little bit challenging, and the rows get a little bit long depending on the size of your block. The block we're doing is a 12.5 inch square. So I'm going to show you how I like to put together a 16 grid block. And hold on to your hats. Okay, so I'm going to put my pattern over here, and let me just pile up everything. We'll get them sort of out of the way. So as I'm looking at my pattern, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just isolate this corner. And what you can see when you're dealing in a 16 grid block is that you basically have four patches. And to me, it's easier to deal with if you're working in 4 patch units. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you something kind of interesting. So I'm going to look at my pattern, and I know that I want to lay out in this particular method or this particular order. to get the desired pattern. Just like that. Oh, see, that was wrong. You got to look very carefully. So there we go. That is the first grid. Now, what I want to show you is something that I find really interesting about putting these together. And that is, I'm going to build another one out that looks just like this. So I don't have to try to do anything different. I'm just going to make the same pattern. Okay, so these are identical. Now watch this. What I can do is I can take the second unit and then I can rotate it. And then that gives me the upper quadrant. Isn't that cool? And then if I rotate it again, it's going to give me the lower quadrant. And then if I rotate it one more time, it gives me the last quadrant. And once I discovered that I could build out my blocks like this, that made doing a 16 patch or a 16 square block way easier for me to mentally wrap my head around. Years ago I took a design course, took a couple of years of it actually, and we used to work with shapes and building patterns and all of that, geometric shapes. Okay, as I was saying, in design classes we would cut our own geometric shapes, squares, rectangles, all manner shapes of rectangles, all kinds of things. And then what we would do is we would just rotate on an axis. And what I've discovered is that using that design principle is how most of these quilt blocks are put together. You start with a basic design, which is this, and then what you're doing is you're just rotating on the axis to get the full design. It's very interesting to me. So what are we going to do? We are going to make four patches, okay? And we're going to make them all just like this, okay? Four patches. So I can lay them out like this so that I don't get confused, because it's very easy when you start getting into something that's a little more complex, like this particular block is. It's very easy to get turned around. So if you have a way to find these patterns and kind of make everything the same way, I just think it's a little bit easier. Okay, so there I've got my 4-patch. Okay, so now that we have all of our blocks and their appropriate quadrant, we're just going to make the 4 patches. So we're going to put these right sides together, and we clip, and then I clip so I know that I'm going to be sewing on this side. And then we'll come to the second row and we'll just do the same thing. And put, very carefully lining up. And then we know that we want to sew on that side. So I'm just going to do this whole pile, and I'm going to chain piece them and then press them open, and I will come back and meet you right here and show you what we have. Okay, we're back, and you can see I have constructed all of my little units. So I've got my pile of blocks that look like this and my pile that look like this. And so what we are going to do now is to take one from here and one from here. Okay, and then we're going to put them together. And then I want you to notice the the little bit of a, I don't know what to call it, an offset here and here. That's your seam allowance. And what we want to do when we are putting these together is to make it so that this little offset is hidden in the seam allowance. And you can see it's down here as well. So we put our pieces together, right side together. Now for this part, I do use pins. And I want you to notice that if you look, let me just bring it up so it's closer. See how there's a little triangle here and a triangle here. This is why I press the seams open where I join my half square triangles, because this is my visual cue to where I want my stitch line to go so that I can retain the points on my my blocks. So this particular block has an added challenge where there's so many intersections where these points are going to meet up. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to put it straight through here, okay, and then I'm going to find the tip of that one and pin right there, and then I'm going to just get the block as nice and square as possible. All right, just check and make sure you are right there. Now you know you have your points attached like they should be, and then we're just going to really get this part, this edge lined up, and then we're going to get this edge lined up. And I like the pins for this aspect of the piecing because the pins don't budge. Once you've pinned your fabric, it's not going to move. So you can see there and then on the back. Just make sure those seams are flat and that you're pinned right there at those points. Okay, we'll do one more. So we're going to bring this one, and we're going to bring this one, okay, and then we're just going to go right sides together. And I'm going to stick that pin through at that point. I do it right in the seam and then line it up perfectly right there. And you'll just have to fiddle with it a little bit, okay? All right, now let's get this other edge where it needs to be. All right, and then we're going to pull this one down where it needs to be. And you're just going to have to fiddle with your fabric a little bit to get it where it needs to be. But you do want to pin, you really want to make sure you're secure at the seam and then on either end, because you don't want your fabric to shift. So this will hold this, and then I know as I get to this edge back here, this end, everything is where it needs to be. Okay. And I'm going to finish those. I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew everything along here, and then I'll be back to show you the 4 patches. Okay, we've got all of our 4 patches made, and you can see on the back all of the seams are pressed open, and once they're open you can see that I've got more of these points. Actually all 4 intersections have points. So this is a deceptively, what's the word? Deceptively difficult. Is that right? Because you think it's going to be so easy, and yet when you start piecing it, it's like, ooh, this is a challenge. So, all right, let's just look at how to now complete or do the next step in the piecing. So here's our upper quadrant, okay? And then I'm going to take this one, I'm going to make it look exactly the same, and then I'm going to rotate it one turn, okay? And then I'm going to take the next one, and I'll make it look just like that, and then I'll rotate it one turn. Isn't this cool? Okay, and then we'll take this one, make it look just like that, and we'll rotate it another turn. And there's your design. That easy. To me, this is a much easier way to put together a block like this. So, okay, our next step then is going to be to put the top and the bottom. And then we'll sew along this, and then we're going to do that same method where we're going to stick the pin at the point through, and we're going to line it up to the next, the 4 patch underneath. And so on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to get the top and bottom to make 2 rows, and then we'll come back and look at that, and we'll get this thing finished. We're back, and you can see I've got both halves of the block ready to go. And now what I'll do is I'll start at that center seam and pin there, and just, you know, same procedure in terms of getting my my points to line up. So like the important ones will be here and here, obviously, because you want to have the diamond as, you know, the center diamond as sharp as possible. But I tell you, this is a challenge block. So if you're up to the challenge, this is the one. So okay, I'm going to get my center together, and then I will be back with you. Before I get to the machine, I just wanted to say one more thing. And that is, when I do this as, you know, the four patches, only at one point in the construction of this block do I have to have this long sew line. And, you know, this is a lot to keep track of. So I've got 2 points and a center seam, and of course the ends, you really want those to line up so that you get those to be sharp also. So this is a lot in one row of stitching to keep straight. And so by splitting it into quadrants and then just doing this one joint at the end, it limits how many of these long rows I've got to sew, which for me is a bonus. That makes it just a little bit easier. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Just, you know, here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pins. Whereas with the 4 patches, I'm only dealing with 3. 3 and then 1 point. So that's just a wee bit easier. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and here is the completed block, and what a thing of beauty it is. This is a bit of a challenge, I have to be honest with you. So you can see, like, I missed a couple of spots. And you know what? That's okay, because when it's in the overall design, it's still going to be beautiful. And I'm going to use it anyway because I think it's so pretty. And of course, when it's part of a larger piece, and this is going to go into a lap quilt, it's going to look beautiful regardless. So there you have the completed piece. And I hope you'll try this method of putting blocks together using the 4 patch. And it only works for the 16 patch blocks. But you know, that's a lot of quilting. Gobs and gobs and gobs of these blocks are done in that 16 square grid. So it would work for a heck of a lot of the blocks that we make. So anyway, give it a try. You can certainly try it with this one. You know, when you go to make this, make sure that you are alert and well rested and have a lot of light, because you're going to need it. And I'll also tell you that the spray starch and good pressing is really important to just kind of get it flat and get it where you need it to be. I'll show you the back. And you can see all of my seams are open. And, you know, I can still see all of my triangles, which I will use when I put the sash onto this to go into the larger project. And there we have it. That is the diamond and a square block. That is block number 3 as part of the Power of 3 Quilt Along challenge that we're doing. And you can find the specific cutting instructions and all of the pattern layout and all of that will be linked in the description. I've got that on my blog. It's just easier to put that kind of information on the blog where you can go see it when you're ready for it and follow along there. That will have all of your cutting instructions for the row as well as an individual block. So if you just want to practice with trying to make this block, this is a great one. And that's the video for today. So I hope that you will try this, and I will see you in the next video. And until then, happy quilting!